Hi, I'm Ken. Let's take a look at my stamp collection. Today we're taking a look at these U.S. transitional postage rate issues. These are sometimes called alphabet rate change stamps. In 1978, the U.S. postal system issued these orange eagle stamps with an A on them. They covered the new first-class rate of 15 cents. But you might wonder, why not just print 15 cents on the stamp? That's a great question. It's all about the bureaucracy. In 1970, Congress created an oversight board called the Postal Rate Commission. It's now called the Postal Regulatory Commission. They were responsible for reviewing and approving postal rate changes. That process could be a long one, and there was no guarantee that the rate increase that the postal system requested would be the final approved rate. So the postal system printed up these A stamps that could go on sale as soon as the new rate was approved, giving them time to design, print, and distribute new stamps with the 15-cent rate on them. So when these stamps were released, A was set to 15 cents forevermore. You can use these on a letter today, but unlike a forever stamp, they will still only be worth 15 cents. It was a little over a month before this 15-cent Roses stamp booklet came out to cover the new rate. As an interesting postal oddity, this Capex souvenir sheet came out about 2 weeks after the rate change. It still had the old 13-cent rate. This wasn't the first time the postal system had to deal with the uncertainty of the Postal Rate Commission process. In 1975, there was a rate change from 10 cents to 13 cents. But the postal system needed to get out stamps for people to use with their Christmas cards. Unfortunately, it wasn't clear when that rate change would go into effect, whether that would happen before or after Christmas. They decided to release these two stamps without any denomination. That rate change didn't actually go into effect until December 31st, so these two stamps were sold for 10 cents. These stamps are still worth 10 cents as postage today. So this example of the first undenominated stamps existed when the 13 to 15 cent rate change came along. The post office could have done the same thing, release another stamp with no rate on it, leaving it up to memory for people to keep track of the values of those undenominated stamps. And that might have been fine if there were only two of them, but letter rates were roughly targeted to rise with inflation. And the postal system knew that there would be increases of a few cents coming more frequently. Memory would be a bad way to keep track of all these issues. Hence, these alphabet stamps came along to fill the need for pre-printing an unknown rate while making it easy to keep track of which undenominated stamps covered each new rate. I just noted that the postal system anticipated more rate increases. And you know me, I've groused about the postal system making money grabs in the past. Anyway, you may be a bit surprised to hear that I'm going to defend them about this one. Here's a chart from our friends at Wikipedia. The dark purple is the first class rate, and the lighter purple is inflation adjusted to 2019 cents. You can see that over time, the cost of a first-class stamp has stayed relatively constant and almost identical to what it was 100 years ago. You can even see the effect of the Postal Rate Commission bureaucracy in the mid-70s, keeping the rate pretty level. I should point out a little math oddity. Back when the cost to mail a letter was just 2 cents, a 1 cent increase was a 50% increase in the cost of postage. 3 cents to 4 cents is a 25% increase. These are big jumps, but the U.S. doesn't really have an effective way to charge fractions of a penny for a single letter. As a result, increases came infrequently and made for big jumps in this table. Now that the rate is higher, the postal system will naturally make more frequent small changes to keep prices in line with inflation. Count on it. So as much as the postal system may annoy me, this time it looks like they're doing the right thing. Now back to the alphabet stamps. You see that I have 3 stamps for each new alphabet type. One is for the stamps in sheets, the second is for stamps from booklets, and the third is for the coil version of the stamps. Collectors, and some stamp catalogs, usually think of these differences as different stamp issues. There's no rule that says you have to do that too, though. Stamps are issued in sheets typically of 100 stamps. That makes it easy for postal clerks to sell as many stamps as a customer wants to buy. Stamps from sheets typically have perforations on all 4 sides of the stamp. For convenience, stamps are also sold in booklets of a set number of stamps. A typical sheet from a booklet might have 8 stamps with 2 rows of 4 stamps. Booklet stamps don't usually have perforations on the edges of those sheets. So you can usually tell stamps from a booklet because they either have 1 straight edge or 2 edges on a corner that aren't perforated. Finally, sometimes stamps are sold in coiled rolls of 100 or more stamps. It used to be common that people had a stamp dispenser on their desk that let them take off individual stamps from one of those rolls, like taking off a piece of tape. These rolls are called coils. Coil stamps typically are not perforated along the edge of the roll, making them easy to tell by the two straight edges on opposite sides of the stamps. Now notice the coil pair I have for the C stamp. There's a line of ink between the two stamps. This is called a line pair. The line comes either from a registration line or from where a seam in the rotary printing drum catches some of the ink. In this case, I think this is a seam. Anyway, these line pairs only happen between a fraction of the stamps, making them slightly more collectible. This is one of those places where I save them when I find one, but I don't go looking for them. As long as we're talking about coils, you should keep an eye out for a similar, less common coil variety, the plate number coil, first issued in 1981. People collect these for the same reason as line pairs, sometimes as singles, sometimes in strips of 3, 5, or even 11, although 5 is the most common today. Back to the alphabet stamps. Through the E stamps, these issues are easy to collect, just 3 stamps in each. Note that the booklet stamps of the C and D stamps are a smaller size. The post office was experimenting with the small size as a cost savings measure. It didn't catch on. Also note that with the E stamp, the image switched from the familiar eagle design to an image of the Earth, E for Earth. This new pattern would extend with the F stamp, F for flower. There are a lot more than 3 stamps on this page. There were 2 types of F stamps. The first was the flower stamp featuring a tulip. There are the 3 standard types, sheet, booklet, and coil. But in this case, there are 2 different booklet stamps with minor color variations. Note that in all the F flower stamps, the words "for U.S. addresses only" has been added. It was hard enough for U.S. Postal Service employees to keep track of these stamps, but this was not a stamp we could impose on the rest of the world. There was actually a UPU rule against sending non-denominated stamps internationally, although that rule's gone now. The last stamp on the first strip is an F-rate makeup stamp. Prior to this F series, the postal system had to have both the new stamp ready and stocks of the incremental stamp ready so that people could still use their existing stamps. This makeup stamp reads, "This U.S. stamp, along with 25 cents of additional U.S. postage, is equivalent to the F-rate stamp." So this stamp is worth 4 cents. Man, this is one of the ugliest stamps the U.S. has ever put out. This is also the first and only time that the transitional rate stamp was reissued with the correct denomination printed on it. I have those on the second strip of this page. The 2 sheet stamps can be distinguished by perforations, as can the 2 coil versions. Finally, there is the wide flag version of the F stamp. I'm missing the F version, but trust me, it looks very similar to the 25-cent stamp. In this case, the 25-cent stamp came out first. This new wider F stamp was made to test dispensing stamps from an ATM machine. These G-rate stamps, G for Old Glory, are a more difficult set to collect. Of course, we still have the sheet, booklet, and coil versions, but there are 3 different colors for the G on the stamp, black, red, and blue. If anyone knows why there were 3 colors, let us know in the comments. The black letter booklet versions include a perforation difference and a very slight color difference. Same with the black letter coil versions. The red letter coils can be distinguished by the perforation types. For the G series, the postal system released rate change versions to cover new rates for postcards in yellow. There are 2 very minor perforation differences. There's also a green stamp for non-profit use, and a blue stamp for pre-sorted business mail. And finally, the Dove stamp was issued for the makeup rate, 3 cents this time, with both a color and perforation difference. Note on the last strip that the black lettered booklet stamps were issued without perforations. The H series used Uncle Sam's hat in the design. The 3 different booklet stamps can be distinguished by perforation differences. That's partly true for the coil stamps too, but the last 2 were issued on different backing paper. To tell used copies apart, you have to look at the corners of the stamps. One has square corners and the other has rounded corners. The 2 makeup rate stamps have minor differences in the font and color of the date inscription. Finally, I've put this 22-cent Uncle Sam stamp on this page. It fits in the catalog between the H stamp and the H makeup rate stamp, and it fits with the thematic tie-in of the hat design. They seem to belong together. and indeed they do. At the time, 22 cents covered the cost of an additional ounce on a letter or a package. That rate had gone down by 1 cent with this rate change. I can only guess that the Postal Rate Commission must have approved this new decreased rate change in time for them to make this design with the corrected denomination. If you know, leave a comment. These H stamps were the last to use letters for the denomination. I imagine it was going to be hard to put out an I stamp since it would look so much like a 1 cent stamp. For the next few rate increases, the Postal Service released stamps inscribed First Class or USA First Class. Still, these stamps were not forever stamps. I imagine, though, that with the increasing postage rates, the smaller difference in rates made errors less consequential to the post office, but I really don't know. Finally, in 2007, the Postal Service released the first forever stamp, this Liberty Bell. That first forever stamp sold for just 41 cents. With the latest postage increase, that stamp is now worth 66 cents, an almost perfect hedge on inflation. Unfortunately, there's no secondary market for forever stamps, so I wouldn't recommend stocking up on them. That's it for today. Thanks for your continued support.